Okay, I think I did it. Hello? Oh, there we go. Hang tight. Okay, we are live. Hang on, let me just get the chat up. Oh, and you know what? My face is in the way of some of the arcs. I probably should have thought about that, shouldn't I? Hold on. Let's make me a little smaller. Whoop. Okay. Might not be perfect, but it'll have to do. All right. So we are ranking every One Piece arc. I think this is like what everyone is doing, at least according to my YouTube algorithm, which maybe says more about me than it does internet trends. But I've been meaning to do this for a long time anyway, so might as well. Couple disclaimers before we get started is first things first, a little context. I've been watching slash reading since Impel Down first was being released in the manga. So that's I think like 2008, 2009, somewhere thereabouts. And I guess that's the one asterisk next to this ranking is that I've reread and rewatched or I've watched the series twice and I've read the series twice up until the time skip. After the time skip, I have not watched and I've only read once, which means that I guess my opinions on some of the post time skip stuff is a little bit fuzzier because a lot of this happened a decade ago and I haven't read it twice to really cement it. So just keep that in mind. Other things. This is going to be relative ranking, not absolute, because really even the worst One Piece arc, I hold it to a higher standard than any other anime. So just pretend like below this D tier is the best arc of every other anime. Okay, so keep that in mind. Just because this indeed it's not bad, it's just relative to the other One Piece arcs. I don't think it hangs as well. And I guess the third thing would be that this is basically entirely based off of the manga. I'm not going to hold like bad anime pacing against particular arcs. Otherwise, I think that would hurt arcs like Marineford and Fishman Island when in reality they are relatively well paced in the manga, right? So that being said, I've gone ahead and arranged these so that they're in order. I don't know how many hot takes I have. I think I might have a couple, but we'll see. And I might also move them around a little bit as we get further and further. Like I'm going to start. I don't have it mapped out where everything is going to go. And contrary to, I know D is a letter of significance in One Piece, but this is the lowest rank here. So let's do it. Romance Dawn. I'm just going to put right in the middle. I think it's a really good setup arc, right? I think within a couple of chapters, it establishes our main cast of 3 of Luffy, Zoro, Nami. We got Alvida, we have Morgan. It's not an exceptional arc, but it does have the Shanks backstory, or the Luffy backstory, which I think is keeping this out of C. I think the Luffy in the hat, I think that's a great backstory, which is confusing because in the manga, they do the backstory in Orange Town. Or I'm sorry, in the anime, they do the backstory in Orange Town. In the manga, it's chapter 1. So, really good setup storyline to introduce us to the world of One Piece and the tone and the characters and all that stuff. Orange Town might be probably one of my first controversial picks. I rate Orange Town really highly. I think that that's where I really, really liked One Piece. I thought the Romance Dawn was good. I thought Orange Town was great. I liked Buggy as an antagonist, and I think probably why I think probably why I rate this a little bit higher than a lot of other folks is I think the thematic ground laying it does is really good and really important. And in Oda slash anime fashion, he's not subtle about it. The whole theme of Orange Town is that anything can be a treasure. We see that with Shushu the dog and the pet store he's defending. We see that with the mayor and his town. We see that with Luffy and the hat, right? And I think this is going to be one of those one of these storylines that ages super well once we know what the One Piece is, because I think Town does a lot of work to kind of on ramp us for the fact that the One Piece, it might be something tangible, but it's probably not something conventional. It might be a little weird, and I think Orange Town sets that up pretty well. Syrup Village, it's going to be somewhere in C or D. I'm going to tentatively place it in C for now. I might drop it depending on where we put some of the rest of the stuff. I think this is an okay arc, which by Oda's standards, I just think it's probably worse than everything or almost everything that comes after it. I like Usopp. I think Oda hams up a little bit of the lying stuff in the beginning. I think Usopp ages like wine. I think when we get to some of the later storylines, he becomes way more exciting. I don't think his intro is that great. I think that a lot of the reasons why people don't like Usopp as a character stem from Syrup Village. And I also think that it didn't spend enough time on the backstory. I feel like Usopp and why he lies and his mother and his father are maybe like half or a quarter of an episode, if that. And I think more time could have been committed to that. Otherwise, it's fine. I really like the ending. I like how Luffy finishes off Kuro with the headbutt. I think that's a great scene. But by and large, it's only okay. Baratier is another really good One Piece arc. This is where we first get introduced to Mihawk. It's where we meet Sanji, Don Krieg, Gin, and all that. Overall, just a really solid One Piece arc. I think obviously the standout moment is Zoro fighting Mihawk and the fallout from that. And overall, I do like Sanji's dynamic with the crew and his backstory and his interactions and his farewell to the chef, Chef Zeph, and all that stuff. So Baratier, just another good One Piece arc. Okay, Arlong Park is definitely going to be our first S tier. So I think One Piece it was good from the beginning. I felt like it got great around Orange Town and dipped a bit in Syrup Village, but I think Arlong Park is where One Piece becomes excellent. Like I think it's at this point when I realized that I was going to commit to the rest of the what was then 300 episodes when I was catching up. A really excellent storyline. It was kind of the first major storyline where each Straw Hat kind of got paired off with a villain, which is something that would become a staple. The fights themselves are excellent. The choreography, I think particularly Luffy versus Arlong and Usopp versus Chu have some of just my favorite fight choreography of any fight in One Piece period. I think one of my favorite panels is when Arlong goes to bite Luffy's neck and he pulls his head away from the pillar. I think that's excellent. Usopp finally standing up for his convictions and not playing around anymore. I think this is when Usopp really had to start fighting. You know what I mean? I just think it was an excellent arc, and obviously, goes without saying, everything with Nami, right? Like, I feel like I'm leaving out some of the obvious reasons why the arcs are excellent, but obviously the Nami backstory, the explanation for why she betrayed the crew. I think that one of my all-time favorite panels and all-time favorite scenes in One Piece is when Luffy finally gets to the fight, when he gets launched out of the water, right? So when he's stuck uh, in the stone underground, Sanji frees him with a kick, and when he's flying up and he's, I'm back, or whatever the translation you're reading says, and he swaps place with Zoro. It's an exciting arc, it's a fun arc, it's a tragic arc, and it's paced perfectly. It is a really incredible little encapsulation of a One Piece arc, and a prelude to what we get after that as well. So, I'm wondering, should I like rank them within the arcs? I think I should. I think I like Romance Dawn more than Bratier, so I'm going to leave that there. Logtown. I think this one is high B. Logtown is really good. I think these are kind of some of the harder arcs to evaluate because it really does a lot of setup. You know what I mean? I don't know if you're gonna count the Straw Hats putting their feet on the barrels as part of Logtown or Reverse Mountain, but if you it's part of Logtown, I think that's really kind of where the East Blue ends. We get introduced to Smoker, we get introduced to Dragon, we get introduced to reintroduced to Buggy and Alvida, and I think there's just a lot of really solemn moments. Particularly, I think one of my favorite moments in Logtown is not Luffy getting executed, but Luffy walking up to the execution platform, right? It's one of like the few times in the series where, Luffy kind of has like a respect for something historical, right? Because it has to do with Roger and the One Piece. And when that happens, Luffy isn't serious outside of fights a lot. And when it does happen, you should pay attention. And I think Logtown does a really good job at making that feel serious. I know Daddy the Parent isn't in the manga, but if you are going to include anime stuff, that's also a great episode. So, worth noting that, so we're done with East Blue, and it's really funny because I think if East Blue was treated as its own singular arc that I was to put on this tier list, I would put it in S. I think East Blue is like the definition of greater than the sum of its parts. Like, I think if you try to slice it up into these, like 6 or 7 different pieces. Not every single arc is excellent, but I think just as an introduction to One Piece, as like a One Piece season 1, I think that East Blue is just excellent. It's fun. I think it does a great job setting the tone of the world. And I think if you get to this point, if you finish East Blue and you are not, in love with One Piece, frankly, you don't deserve it. But more importantly, you can check out, right? It'll never be for you if you're not totally on board by the time you finish these storylines here. So, all right. Up next, we have Reverse Mountain. So Reverse Mountain, another one of those ones that's kind of hard to rank because 2 reasons, right? One, it's not really a major storyline in its own right. It's really just an introduction to the Grand Line, to how it works. It's an introduction to Laboon, which I think gets better in hindsight with information given in Thriller Bark, but like in a vacuum, I think this is probably low B or high C. I'm going to stick it in high C for now. And I say that I think I like Reverse Mountain. If it is a C, it's definitely the best of the C's. There's a little bit of world building stuff. This is where we first hear about, what was then known as Raftel from Crocus. And I think that's a great little moment. I do like Laboon's intro. It's just that outside of that, how much memorable is really happening. I know this is the intro to Vivi and her partner, and really how much of what you think about Vivi as a character comes from Reverse Mountain. Probably not a whole lot. In fact, that was when she was an antagonist, and Oda heel turned her after that. But overall, I think Reverse Mountain, it is okay. It's okay. I don't know if this is gonna be a hot take. I think Whiskey Peak is one of the worst One Piece arcs for a couple reasons. Uh, First off, it introduces Baroque Works as a villain, as a villain organization, which is great. We have Zoro fighting the bounty hunters in his 1 versus 100 battle, which is great. Where I think some of the sins of Whiskey Peak come up is Oda's reluctance to kill characters. I think it really retroactively makes Igaram's sacrifice worse, right? I think that Igaram dying is a really dramatic moment within Whiskey Peak. I think the anime does an excellent job at handling it too. It's like this really serious moment and like a huge tonal shift as the Straw Hats realize like what a big threat they're up against relative to the cakewalk that was, the 100 chapters before that. And I think Igaram not dying is. I think it should be up there in terms of community outrage with Pell not dying. I think it is that bad, and actually even worse than that. I think Whiskey Peak is one of the worst One Piece arcs is I think it's one of the very, very, very few times in the manga where a Straw Hat, let alone a Straw Hat, I think Luffy acted out of character in a way that's totally uncharacteristic of him and how Oda writes the rest of the story when he fought Zoro. I think Luffy waking up to all of the bounty hunters being dead and immediately not trusting Zoro and fighting him is just like a total, just doesn't make any sense with anything that happened before or since then. While I did think it was fun, I did like a lot of the Devil Fruit powers that were introduced, like the boogers and Miss Valentine's Day with her ability to change her weight. I think it has its moments, but overall, between just a really out of place Zoro versus Luffy fight and Igaram's sacrifice, I think that this is one of the worst One Piece arcs. So, all right. After that, I think I have another hot take. I think Little Garden goes to the top of A. Little Garden is one of my favorite One Piece stories. It's the first island in the Grand Line that they go to, right? And it's where we meet Dory and Brogy, the giants. And why I think Little Garden sticks out for me is, one, again, you're going to notice a trend. I think why I love it, it's a lot of the same reason why I love Arlong Park. It's just as like this little standalone package, it's incredible. The explanation for the mountains on Little Garden, the weird hollow mountains that you don't even pay attention to, the fact that they were actually, bones in the hunting contest that Dory and Brogy had, and how that mirrors Luffy's and Sanji's fight. Just the honor of the giants and how that gives Usopp a sort of North Star to move towards with Elbaf, right? Because before that, Usopp's dream that he has to be, proud warrior of the sea, it's a little bit more nebulous than everyone else's dreams, right? Like everyone else has sort of a concrete, specific goal, whereas Usopp's is like a little subjective. And it's at this point where Oda corrects this and kind of gives him a particular ending to his story, right? Elbaf is going to be Usopp's story, and he's going to have a huge character moment there for sure, if and when we do get there. And also, I think that Little Garden is one of the earliest and most fun showcases of devil fruits in One Piece. Because in the East Blue, except for Buggy and a little bit in Logtown with Smoker and Alvida, devil fruits were kind of supposed to be this rare treasure that not everyone had. And by the time we get to Little Garden and the fact that we're dealing with all of Crocodile's agents, devil fruits are running freely. And I think this is a fight, that I don't think gets rated very highly among One Piece fans, because I know it's not an anime fan favorite fight of being like a strict skill-based Luffy 1v1. But for what it's worth, I think just the way that Mr. 3 and Miss Golden Week use their powers together in really fun ways, and the traps that Mr. 3 sets. I think it's a really incredible and fun showcase of the fun of One Piece and its power system, at least what its power system was before time skip. And I really respect it for that. And also, I think Little Garden, once again, it ends really excellently. I love the send off that Dory and Brogy give to the Straw Hats. Not only do they destroy the goldfish or the giant goldfish to let them pass, but it also breaks their weapons, which simultaneously makes their perpetual duel less lethal. So they still get to fight each other till the end of time, and now they're at a lower risk of killing each other. I just think it's a really touching little story, and I think it's one of the best in One Piece. I really love Little Garden. I don't know why people put it at the bottom of these kinds of lists so much. I think really if you go back and you reread it for what it is, I think you'll enjoy it a lot. Plus, it's dinosaurs, right? It's fun, you know. It's just, I think it's got a lot of that old One Piece adventurous spirit in it, which is something that a couple of the other arcs we're going to talk about have as well. Drum Island, I am going to put at the bottom or towards the bottom of A. I think Drum Island is a really excellent arc. Once again, I think that people don't love this arc a lot because Walpole isn't a particularly threatening villain, but I don't think he was supposed to be. Or he obviously wasn't supposed to be, right? I think what he was, and it's something that's going to come up as we get into Shibondi Archipelago. He's really just he feels like a late game One Piece villain, not in terms of strength, but in terms of like what he represents thematically, right? Like the greedy king, and sort of One Piece's themes ever since Shibondi of this upper crust that looks down on the rest of the world and all that stuff. That's really what Walpole is there for. He's not supposed to be individually powerful, and that's why his subordinates are probably stronger than him and why he delegates all that work off to them. More importantly, part of why I like Drum Island is a couple reasons. One, I think Chopper's introduction is great. I love his backstory. I love his design, especially during Drum Island before he got super cutified. I love Luffy's climb up the mountain. I think the hero look, and I think again, much like Little Garden and Arlong Park, I think that the ending, it just Oda hits the landing so hard with Drum Island, with the turning the big drums into the cherry blossom trees. I think that's a really powerful moment. I think it feels very One Piece, just like this awe-inspiring, subdued little thing that means a lot to the individual characters. And last but not least, in terms of why I think Drum Island is really excellent, this is where we learn about Gold Roger's real name, right? I think a lot of us take that for granted nowadays. When I was catching up, back then, at least here in the West, One Piece, it was part of the big three, but it definitely wasn't as big of like this cultural thing in the way it is today. I had no idea Gold Roger's real name when I got to this point, and when Dr. Kureha says it, it's a really great little moment, and you realize, oh my god, this that must have been planned, right? And it's also the introduction to a couple of other big game characters, like Blackbeard is first mentioned during Drum Island, and Ace. We first get our glimpse of Ace here, even though he doesn't meet the crew until a little bit later. So Drum Island, a really great arc. Another really great arc is Alabasta. I think Alabasta sits at the top of A. I think this is just a pure example of the One Piece formula, right? Where everyone gets paired off into the little fights. We get a much greater involvement of, the town and their woes, and Luffy solving the town's problems by beating the bad guy, or in this case, not the town, but a whole country. I think his fight with Crocodile is excellent. Basically every fight is excellent in Alabasta, in the manga and in the anime. I love Vivi's send off. Just a really, really strong arc all around. Again, it loses a couple points because I think the Pell fake death, is annoying. I don't want to beat that to death. And again, I don't have an issue with Oda not wanting to kill characters. I think that's fine. But you can't also set them up with these dying stakes and then not kill them. I think that that is particularly my issue, that Oda wants to have his cake and eat it too. When in reality, if he didn't want to kill Pell, he shouldn't have had Pell get a bomb detonated on top of him, right? So that's like probably the one asterisk there for Alabasta. Aside from that, it's a fun, it's a really fun arc. It's got a lot of great moments. Crocodile's an incredible villain. It's the first villain that really gives Luffy a hard time with 3 different rounds. And of course, the final round is excellent. The way it ends is excellent. Just a really, and the rain falling on Alabasta, it's just an iconic scene. So, all right. This is going to be another controversial one. Jaya is probably my favorite arc on this entire list. Every time I reread One Piece, every time I rewatch One Piece, I am most excited during Jaya. And I know that's probably a weird one because it's not particularly long, but once again, I think it's this really concentrated, thematically resonant, really fun bit of One Piece, right? I think it does a couple of things. First, again, on the themes about, pursuing your dreams and, the dynamic between Luffy and Bellamy. I think it's excellent. I think the other reason why I love this arc so much, to me, this is where the One Piece world really opened up. Particularly with, introduction to Sengoku, right? We see 2 more of the 7 warlords who at the time that was a huge deal, seeing Don Flamingo and Kuma for the first time. We get to see Lafitte, and we meet Blackbeard, and this is where we first see Whitebeard, and, Shanks sent Rockstar to go talk to him. There's just so much going on, and One Piece was doing that to that point prior, but really at this point, I think it hit critical mass of when I realized just how big the One Piece world was, and how our main characters are, at this time, just a small part of it, and they, become an increasingly large part of it. But I also think, beyond the world building, it just feels like peak One Piece from beginning to end. Just with the whole needing to, with their goal of getting to Sky Island and meeting Cricket and getting his backstory and his goals, and getting the bird, and then going out and then riding the knockup stream and trying to escape Blackbeard who's chasing them, and then obviously Luffy fighting Bellamy, and the world and the drunk guy who realized Luffy's bounty and how Bellamy was outmatched. There's just so many little moments in this arc. Like, not a single second of it disappoints, even in the anime. I know this is based on the manga, but if you watch the anime, episodes 144 to 152, I have them memorized because I've only rewatched One Piece twice. I've definitely watched Jaya way more than that, because it is this distilled little perfect version of One Piece, and I just can't get enough of Jaya. Every time I get back to it, I'm just so excited. So Jaya, I think, I would put it up, if not my absolute favorite arc, it's definitely close, but we'll see as we get further into this. I also am going to put Sky Island up here. Sky Island, again, it's kind of weird treating Jaya and Skypiea separately, but Skypiea, it's obviously the continuation of Jaya's story, and it is another example of peak One Piece, in my opinion. And I think why, first off, we get introduced to this totally new world and this totally new culture, and it's just visually, with everything being white, it's just so radically different from everything that we've seen prior. I think Eneru is great, partially because he's just so arrogant and he doesn't think he can be beat, and just Luffy being the perfect counter to that just by pure happenstance. I just think it's so funny. I love their fight. I love the backstory with Kagura and Noland, and I think probably why I think this is one of the best arcs. Really, this is where I gained just full confidence in Oda that One Piece as a story will end perfectly, right? Because the way that in Sky Island he was able to take together all of these disparate threads and really weave them together into a perfectly reasonable and thematically appropriate ending. Luffy defeating Eneru, it simultaneously has him deal with the big bad. It lets Kagura not Kagura, it lets Cricket down, and the Sarayama Alliance lets them know about that Sky Island is up here. It also explains the shadows that were cast, the giant shadows. It was actually not giants; they were up in the sky. It gives Wiper, renewed faith in everything, and it's just with one page, I think Oda just tied together like 20 threads, and it blew my mind when I first read Sky Island. I think Sky Island is just one of the best One Piece arcs. I think that if there's anything to say about it, I do think it drags a little bit in the middle. I think particularly the part that I'm never happy about rewatching is the ordeal of balls. I think that part can be, all things considered, a little tough, and I totally get why not everyone ranks Skypiea as just absolutely peak. But for me, it is, and I think its highs just so overshadow their lows that it doesn't even matter to me. It's just that excellent. Okay, Foxy. I think Foxy goes at the bottom of C, or maybe towards the middle of C. Maybe the top of C, now that I'm looking at it. I think Foxy gets a really bad rep as an arc, the Long Ring, Long Land arc. I think, and it's kind of why ranking One Piece just based on these individual storylines could be hard, because even if I put it in D, I would still never take this arc out of One Piece for a second, because what it does to serve the arcs around it is tremendous, right? It gives Luffy and Usopp one last serious arc together where they work as a team, and it really showcases their friendship before things dramatically change in the next arc. It acts as sort of like a lighthearted tone, and really short and sweet, just because of what's on either side of it being long and serious. I think Foxy as a villain, again, I know people don't like him because he's not threatening or whatever, but I think he's supposed to be a comedic character, right? Like the arc, it's a half of it's a tribute to wacky races, right? So it's, for what it is, I think it's good. I think part of the other reason why people dog on it so much, I think the anime is like 20 times worse than the manga. It adds so much unnecessary stuff. I like it. I like the introduction to Aokiji. This is where we first hear about, not first hear about Garp. We hear about Garp way further, but we hear about Luffy's grandfather, right? And before we knew that was Garp, Aokiji mentions he has an unpaid debt to Luffy's grandfather. That's why he lets him go. So there's some cool little world building in there. It really shows us some of the threats that we're going to face in the future with the admirals. Again, it's not my favorite. I think even though it does do a lot right, I think probably to me, again, why I think it loses points as far as one of the rare out of, I don't know if I would consider it an out of character moment, but there's some weird dialogue between Zoro and Chopper in this arc that like just parts of it just didn't feel right. But aside from that, I do like the Foxy arc. It's not excellent, but I'm confident putting it at the high of C. Okay, so let's get this out of the way. Water 7 and Ennis Lobby. Whoops, come on. And post Ennis Lobby, we'll just put them all together. Nobody has hot takes on this one, right? These are in the top tier of every tier list for a reason. We'll start with Water 7. Water 7, the Luffy versus Usopp fight. It's serious, and just the way that the tone shifts so dramatically for the series at this point. And crew infighting, and with Robin leaving, it just feels like everything is just getting laid on at once. We get introduced to Frankie, and we get his backstory, the reveal with CP9, Tom and Frankie's backstory, and it's just a really good arc. I don't know if we're gonna count the train ride to Ennis Lobby as part of Water 7, but if we are, I think it's really excellent. It's got some of the funniest moments in One Piece with Sanji fighting Wanzo the cook, right? And him getting his smoke in that Jerry's face, that tall guy, I think. Frankie fighting Nero? Oh man, it's been a while since I watched this, but there's just so many funny moments in that train ride. I think it's really great, and I also love the Vice Admiral introduced on the train, the guy who only cuts at right angles, and obviously the whole build up before they get on the train with the Aqua Laguna coming and the Luffy splitting apart the two buildings. There's just so much build up and so much hype, and it's so dramatic. Like everything after Luffy versus Usopp and the breaking into the mansion and just everything, it's just like it just builds and builds and builds and builds. And obviously we get all of our payoff in Ennis Lobby, which is why you can't really separate these two. Ennis Lobby is great payoff for the build up that was Water 7, right? We get incredible fights for all the Straw Hats, right? I think Luffy versus Lucci, it's a fan favorite for a reason. Luffy gets 2 really fun power-ups. This is the first time that Luffy goes Super Saiyan, and I think that that's something that a lot of anime can get wrong, and One Piece didn't. I think the power-ups, they aren't for the sake of it. I think the designs are cool, and I think they fit with the vibe of the series incredibly well. There's so many great moments that it's almost impossible to even begin listing them. But, of course, the ending, Luffy defeating Lucci and everyone escaping on the Merry together. I think that's just one of the top scenes of the arc, is everyone jumping off into the ocean to get onto the Merry. It's just this, incredible payoff for Water 7. Of course, Robin's backstory, and we get some little world building in there as well with what's it called? With the Ancient Kingdom and the Void Century and all that. Soka King shoot down that flag. There's just so much, I Want to Live. There's just there are easily 10 different moments in this storyline that are peak One Piece, you know what I mean? So it's just a really excellent arc. And post Ennis Lobby, for dramatically different reasons, I think it's excellent as well. Even if you detached it from these two, I think this arc hangs for a lot of the fun world building that it does. This is where we first hear about the Yonko, with when we learn how powerful Shanks really is, which in hindsight it makes a lot of sense. I remember when I was catching up, it didn't even occur to me how strong, to ask the question, how strong is Shanks really? It makes so much sense that he's one of the strongest pirates in the world, because he's got someone, he was sending Rockstar around to do his errands, and Rockstar had 96,000 bounty, right? So that made it just really opened my eyes when I saw that. I love the explanation or the introduction of Garp and him bringing up Dragon, the reintroduction of Kobe and Helmuppo. I think the payoff of um, how Frankie spent the money buying the wood to build a perfect ship. I think it's just a great replacement for a great continuation of the Mary. I'm going to count Mary's death as part of post Ennis Lobby, and that's obviously just an incredibly touching moment in the series. The first real death that's happening outside of a flashback, I believe, but definitely the first real death that hits right in the way that this one does. And of course Frankie joining the crew and Robin forcing him to join the crew. It's a really great a really, really great arc. So obviously these three, Water 7, Ennis Lobby, Post Ennis Lobby, just there's a reason that everyone puts these in S, and I don't disagree for a second. I think Thriller Bark, as far as like the large, like the really big sagas of One Piece, I think Thriller Bark is my least favorite, which isn't to say that it doesn't have its moments. I think actually it has some really exceptional moments. I love, the being introduced to Brooke's backstory, and nothing happened. Right? It has some really 10 out of 10 moments in it, but I think the moment to moment of reading Thriller Bark is less exciting. Really, everything up until Oars, it's just. I remember not really caring when I was reading it the first time. I think on rereads it fares a little bit better, but I don't think the stakes feel right and everyone's motivations. It just feels like this arc doesn't have as many characters you care about, right? Other than Brooke. I do like Moria as a villain, though. I love his design. I like how different he looks than you'd expect one of the 7 warlords to look. And obviously the end really knocks it out of the park with Kuma, but like the first 70% of this arc, it's just not my favorite. Again, it's one of those ones I don't look forward to rereading this one relative to the other stuff. It's one of those things where what's happening before and what's happening after is just, to me, mountains more interesting than Thriller Bark. Okay, so Shibondi, it's one of my favorite arcs and I don't even know how to pronounce it. Again, it's up there with Jaya of when I'm rereading One Piece, I look forward to Shibondi more than almost anything else, right? Same thing with Jaya. I think Shibondi is kind of like what I mentioned with Drum Island before. I think this is really where we see the late game villain of One Piece, right? Not necessarily an individual with power who is going to rival Luffy, but more so the institution that is the villain, right? The celestial dragons and their slaves, and this is really where you realize that the end point of the story is Luffy becoming Abraham Lincoln, right? It is the introduction to how we knew it beforehand, but we really get to see it firsthand here of how nefarious the One Piece world can be, and I think Shibondi does an incredible job showcasing it. And beyond that, just some of the individual moments. I remember my jaw dropped when we met Rayleigh, right? We first see that title card show up, the right-hand man of the King of the Pirates. It's one of those things where I wasn't reading weekly at the time. I was catching up right around here. I never even thought about it. Oh yeah, what did happen in Gold Roger's crew, right? And when you get there, it's just it's just great. And the way he just solemnly explains, his final days with the crew and his final days with Roger and the last words he shared with him before he died. And, Luffy getting mad about the spoilers of Usopp trying to spoil One Piece for him. This is where we get our first little hint about Luffy having a dream beyond being Pirate King, right? Where Shanks brings up Terralie and a little flashback during Shibondi of, you know, he said the same words as our captain, right? I think in hindsight that line makes tremendously more sense with everything that's come since then. And of course, lastly, just the ending to this arc, right? Where the Straw Hats lose, right? I think that it's something that I wasn't prepared for. This arc really deviates from the One Piece formula, and I like the One Piece formula, but seeing it just totally inverted like that, and the Straw Hats get crushed and then separated, I think it's truly excellent, and it's one of those ones I love watching it every time. The auction house is incredible. I didn't even talk about Luffy punching the Celestial Dragon, right? Like, that's how good this arc is. It's one of the best scenes in the series. It can slip your mind. Luffy punching the Celestial Dragon is just a tremendous, tremendous 10 out of 10 scene. And this however many, what is it, 15, 20 chapters, just has so many incredible scenes. The introduction to the rest of the worst generation, right? It's just such an incredible arc, and it makes, just talking about it makes you want to go reread it. So, all right, so this is where I think this might be another one of my hot takes. I'm not entirely sure. I think Amazon Lily is the worst arc in One Piece, which again doesn't even mean it's bad. Like, I would rather reread Amazon Lily than read whatever other manga, anyone on the planet's referring or recommending to me. But just in terms of One Piece arcs, I think where this one really hurts, it's right after Shibondi. It's the first arc without the crew, and I think, unlike some of the other arcs we're going to talk about in a second, I don't think it does a good enough job filling that vacuum. Really, to me, the only interesting characters in Amazon Lily are Luffy and Hancock. I couldn't care less about what was going on with anyone. I thought Marguerite, who was probably the character of third most importance in that storyline, just the most boring character in all of One Piece. I think she's got kind of a boring design too. It's just a really, I find it to be a really tough arc for that reason. I know there's some cool stuff in here. I think Luffy has a couple great moments, especially when he doesn't let the spectators in the arena see the slave brand on Hancock's sisters. And it's also, again, kind of a glimpse into the cruelty of the Celestial Dragons and, a perspective given from one of their slaves. And I think that that's all good stuff. But just by and large, I think the moment to moment of reading this without a crew and without any interesting characters to fill the void of that crew, I think I just found it really, I find it really tough to get through every time. And I also don't think it, it almost feels like a setup arc for Impel Down. Like, there is no triumphant ending to wrap a bow on Amazon Lily. It's really just they peter off and they sneak away to Impel Down, which is great. The story needed that. Like, Luffy needed to get to the prison, and that's kind of why Oda wrote it that way, and I respect that. I just don't think I think Amazon Lily suffers for needing to get Luffy to it had this contrived way of getting Luffy to a very particular place, and it really just feels like the worst kind of setup arc, and there's just not enough meat on its bones. So I think Impel Down itself, though, is a really excellent arc. I'm going to put it here at the bottom of A. Impel Down, I think, solves the problem of Luffy not having a crew by giving him a sort of temporary crew. Mostly of reintroductions of former characters. This is really where Buggy becomes one of my favorite characters. Bon Clay as well. I think they do, and Mr. 3. It's just, I love the unlikely pair up thing. And as far as, villains becoming, frenemies, I think this is one of the best examples of that in any anime that I've ever seen. Granted, I haven't seen a ton, but I really love Impel Down. I love Magellan as a villain. I think that he's intimidating and simultaneously funny with the diarrhea. I just think that this arc is just brilliantly paced. I love the setup of Impel Down being this just increasingly escalating torture chambers effectively, and they move through them, and it's just like every couple chapters you're getting this new, you're still in the prison, but you're almost getting a new setting, right, with its own challenges and its own creatures and its own prisoners. This is where we meet Ivankov, and I think that whole section is great, and Luffy being nursed back to health, and Impel Down is just a really great arc. And again, one of the other same reason that I loved Little Garden, I love that this is by now Oda had sort of definitely locked in a lot of what Haki was going to be doing, but I think this is before Haki got overboard, and Devil Fruit powers mattered a tremendous amount in Impel Down. And the way that they synergize, and Luffy and Mr. 3 teaming up to punch Magellan by using the wax. Like, I loved how the fights played out in Impel Down. So a really tremendous arc. It definitely, it might even, I think it should be higher in A. I think that feels right to me. Maybe these two, it's hard to say. I'm going to put Orangetown below Drum Island now that I'm re-looking at this. Okay, excellent. Marineford. Marineford, again, an excellent arc. I think why it's really important to specify that this was based on manga. I think Marineford, I know a lot of people stopped watching the anime after Marineford, and like how the time skip the anime gets way worse, and it does. I think the anime is actually like it's terrible in Marineford. You just don't realize it because like the content is so good, but this is really where the anime jumped the shark after it was starting to fray a little bit in Thriller Bark. But anyway, without talking about the anime too much, Marineford itself is excellent. I think this whole build-up of all of these characters that we've been, interacting with or not interacting with for like 500 chapters, all coming together on either side of this conflict, and the stakes, and Ace, will he die, will he not die, and him actually dying, Whitebeard dying as well, and just everything about this arc is so good. Again, there's other world building tidbits. Whitebeard's final speech, right, with him declaring that the One Piece is real. The little flashback he has with Gold Roger, right before he dies. Marineford. And the other thing, I had the pleasure of reading this in real time, and what I think you don't get in the anime, and if you haven't read this arc, you need to. Just almost the whole thing is 2-page spreads. Just from like an artistic standpoint, just like you're just turning the page and just like it's just war. It's this huge thing, and really it makes me excited for what the final fight in One Piece, or the final arc in One Piece, is really going to be like. So post-war, I'm gonna put at the bottom of B. I'm assuming it's kind of tough. There's so much that happens here. I think Great Terminal, with the Luffy backstory part 2, where we meet Sabo and Dadan and everything, I think it's pretty good. To be honest with you, I think Luffy's Luffy's flashback, at least this part of it, I think it's one of my less favorite backstories among the crew. I just felt like it was a little basic, and yes, I think it does justify some of Luffy's thoughts, and it makes a lot of sense, and like Ace protecting him and all that. It just felt like it just wasn't. It didn't have as much to it as so many of the other backstories. I didn't feel it as hard. You know what I mean? I don't think it had a singular, incredible moment. And the other thing, I think that was supposed to be Sabo's death, but even at the time, everyone knew Sabo wasn't dead. We all knew Sabo was going to come back when we were reading this, because of those, that there's like a throwaway line somewhere where like, I think Ivankov's talking to Dragon, and it's like, oh my god, all those wounds. And it's like everyone knew that Dragon had taken in Sabo. So I feel like The stakes weren't there. I think why I'm putting it in B and not lower is everything except for Great Terminal, like the around the world chapters that happen after Marineford, leading up to the time skip, where we get to check in on like what basically everyone in the One Piece verse is doing before we go to the time skip. I mean, that if that part of it was independent of Great Terminal, this would be an A. You know what I mean? Because I love those little, around the world chapters where we get to check in on everyone and remember why One Piece. Remember or get a reminder that One Piece is as big as it is. I think those are just some really excellent storylines. Uh, and we get to see all of what the supernovas are doing, the worst generation. It's just that I found really fun. But combining them both together, I think this is a B. I think Great Terminal, again, I'd put it at a C if it was independent on its own. Return to Shibondi. I'm going to go ahead and put this down here. It is, for what it is, it's totally acceptable One Piece. Really, to me, the standout moment is, Gold Roger, seeing him with the hat. That was a huge moment. But really, aside from that, it's kind of just a lot of gags, which are great. I like the Straw Hat, the fake Straw Hat crew, and the Straw Hats showing off their power. But by design, this arc had to have low tension and low stakes because it was really just meant to showcase how much more powerful the Straw Hats are, right? So again, it's similar to Foxy, where like, yeah, it's a C, but also like I recognize what it was doing, I respect what it was doing. It's just in a vacuum, independent of the other arcs that it's helping to enable. I just don't think it's excellent in its own right. Fishman Island is a really excellent, really great arc. I think this gets undervalued a lot because people watch the anime more than they read the manga, and the anime for Fishman Island is terrible. I didn't watch it end to end. In fact, that's why I stopped watching, because of how terrible the pacing gets at this point. And the animation, at least now with Wano, we have bad pacing but good animation. From Fishman Island to like Whole Cake Island, we have bad pacing, bad animation, and this is really like the beginning of a dark era for One Piece, which, to be frank, I don't think it's completely out of in terms of the anime, right? Again, we're not rating it based on the anime. That's why it's high on the list, because the manga doesn't have this problem. Again, I was reading this one in real time, and I remember really, really loving it. I think it executes on the One Piece formula really well. I think I really love the villain. I know people don't like Hody, but to me, I think what makes Hody really special is the explanation for why he does what he does. I remember everyone was waiting for the backstory of like, why does he hate humans? Like, what happened to him? And the twist that nothing happened to him. Right? He's just an evil person. Who hates others because of them not being fishmen like he is. Right? I think it's a really poignant racism allegory. I think it hits how it was supposed to hit. I love the MLK Malcolm X thing that Queen Otohime and Fisher Tiger have going on. I love, again, this is another one similar to Marineford in the manga. When the Straw Hats fight all of the Fishman pirates, it's like there's an entire chapter in there of just like double page spreads, and it's really awesome watching the Straw Hats showcase all of their new abilities and how much more powerful they are than the Fishmen. It's really good. So I think Fishman Island is one of the better One Piece arcs for sure. I don't think Punk Hazard is one of the better One Piece arcs. I don't have any singular moment I can think of for wanting to put it so lowly. It's really just overall, in much the same way as Thriller Bark, I just think I didn't care a lot about some of the complementary characters in this arc. I like Kanjuro and Kanjuro, or not Kanjuro, Kinemon and Momonosuke. Nowadays, I like them more, but in Punk Hazard, I don't think Oda did enough to get us attached to them there. At least I wasn't attached to them. I didn't really care about the plight of the individuals here in Punk Hazard. I love the explanation for the island being what it was, how it's where Aokiji and Akainu fought. But beyond that, I think that in terms of like, standard long form One Piece formula arcs, I just don't think this is the best implementation of the formula. And unlike something like Thriller Bark, I don't think it has a ton of 10 out of 10 moments to just pull it up a little bit even, right? It just feels like this is like, as far as long One Piece arcs go, I think it's One Piece at its most weak. At least Whiskey Peak and Amazon Lily had the benefit of being short. Punk Hazard, it's definitely not the longest post time skip arc, but it's not short by any stretch of the means, and I just don't think it does enough to justify its length. So I think Dressrosa does justify its length. So Dressrosa, ooh, this is hard. It's somewhere up here. Again, like, I feel like I'm splitting hairs a little bit, but it's a really great arc. I love the introduction of all we get inundated with new characters here, and so many of them are so good. They have really interesting designs. They have really interesting stories. I think Don Chinjiao might be like my favorite non-Straw Hat like ever, because of his little micro backstory, and his dynamic with Luffy and how much it changes when Luffy solves his problem with his head. And there's just so many little stories going on here that are so excellent, and so many characters and so many sites. We get our first tournament storyline in One Piece with the Gladiator Arena, but more importantly, I think they funnel really well into the greater macro story of Dom Flamingo controlling this place, and I think his well-deserved smackdown from Luffy is this is, if Punk Hazard was the One Piece formula, at its worst, I think this is the One Piece formula just firing on all cylinders. You know what I mean? I think why I wouldn't put it in S, it's not. I don't think there's particular things pulling it down as much as there is just not as much pushing it up as the rest of them, right? It's not like everything defaults to an S and then I dock points. Think about everything starting at a B and then it goes up or down, right? So like even a totally blameless, faultless arc can be at a B. It just might not do incredible things. Like I would put like Gaimon, Gaimon isn't on here. I don't know why it's not it's its own island, but the Gaimon storyline, I would put that as a B. Like, it doesn't really do anything wrong, but I don't think it does anything super excellent either, except for some cool thematic stuff it does. But anyway, I really like Dressrosa. Reading this in real time, it was a ton of fun. There's just so many great things going on with God, Usopp, and all that stuff. So Dressrosa is really great. Zoe. I think Zoe I like for a lot of the same reasons as Jaya and Shibondi. Like, this is our little micro world building arc. I don't think it's as great as Jaya or Shibondi, but I think for what it is, as like a little micro arc before Whole Cake Island, I think it does a really excellent job setting it up. Raizo is safe. It's just a really excellent moment. We get introduced to like this whole new culture of people, and we get some lore, and we get kind of like a final destination. Like we kind of learn more about how we're actually going to get to the One Piece, and what getting to the final island is actually going to mean. So Zoe is great, and also I'm wondering how much more I'm going to think about this now that Zunisha himself, I forget, is becoming an increasingly relevant part to the story. So I can't wait to learn more about his story. So anyway, Whole Cake Island. I don't know on which side of Dressrosa I'm going to put this, because I rank them very similarly. I think that they are like really excellent post time skip arcs. To be frank, I think that the most excellent post time skip arcs aren't as highly rated as the most excellent pre time skip arcs. I like post time skip, just not as much. I really think, and I alluded to this a little bit before when I was talking about Little Garden and Impel Down, I think Oda really jumped the shark with like Hockey. I think Hockey is the worst thing that ever happened to One Piece. I'm not gonna belabor the whole video about it now. I just think the fights have gotten tremendously less interesting since then, with a few exceptions. I think Luffy versus Katakuri is excellent, not because of Hockey, but again, what makes it excellent is the cool ways that Luffy uses his powers, right? The way that, you know, he stretches his arm multiple times. More particularly with Luffy versus Katakuri, you know, I'll rank it above Dressrosa because I think Luffy versus Katakuri is better than Luffy versus Don Flamingo. I just love the way that Oda draws your eyes around a manga page with Luffy's fists, right? Like his fists almost act as this arrow that say "Follow me," and it's just. I remember having fun reading that fight and watching the fight choreography. I think it's just some of the best fight choreography in One Piece. It drags a little bit. I think what's keeping this out of S. It drags a little bit at the end when the Straw Hats are trying to escape, but there's a ton of really excellent parts in here. Just having a Sanji focused arc and having his final fight be, you know, building the cake, right? I think it's just really in line with Sanji. I think you know, his backstory part 2 I think is excellent. His whole dynamic with Pudding is really good. And also there's one chapter in here that if you reread it, you'll see it. I don't know how much this came across in the anime, but you know, it's kind of framed like Big Mom is practically Godzilla, right? Like with her totally destroying the Merry, and you know, there's some really great stuff in Whole Cake Island. I think it's one of the better post time skip arcs. Reverie, I am going to put right here next to Zoe. Again, it's another world building arc. I think it does an excellent job at building the world. This, I don't know. I think we're probably going to see more of the Reverie, or at least the fallout of it soon. So this ranking might change, but I think Reverie is really excellent. I'm a sucker for those little world building arcs, so you could probably tell based on the rest of this list, right? I don't think Reverie is the best among them, but I think it is still great in its own right, and I'm really looking forward to the payoff for Eam and the giant straw hat and all that stuff. I feel weird about ranking Wano, to be honest, because it's not over, right? I think 1049, it feels like we just hit the climax, but we still got the resolution, so I'm gonna abstain from ranking Wano. But I'll have to follow up once it is over. It feels like it's going to be an A. You know, depending on how the rest of this goes. I think it's almost certainly not an S. And to me, the reason why, I'll just tentatively put it here in A right now. I think Wano has a real like character bloat problem, and I think like unlike a lot of other arcs that had a lot of characters, like say Marineford, the fact that all of them need to kind of thematically fit to Wano's Japan theme, kind of makes them less memorable, right? So like for Marineford, yeah, we had 1 million characters, but they're on all these different crews with all these different styles and, you know, all these different names, and just so much, you know, just so many different things and ways you can remember these characters. I think where Wano struggles is that like almost every important character is samurai, and to me that's just, you know, a little boring to me, just thematically. And obviously, like, it's Japan. Like, I get why it is what it is. But I think that Wano needed less characters and less things going on, to be frankly. Like, did we need the 9 red scabbards, or 7? I forget how many. Now I can't remember, but I feel like there could have been less scabbards and less other things going on, to be frank. Overall, still a really great arc. The Roger flashback, obviously. I love the Gear 5th and and the more cartoony aesthetic that Luffy took on while fighting Kaido. Um, uh, and who knows? I think maybe the payoff, maybe the resolution will bump this up to an S. We'll have to see. I think A is just a good tentative placement for it. It's great, just not excellent in my opinion. But that's it. That's One Piece. This is a top-heavy list, but that's because One Piece is great. And again, I think the other part of this that I mentioned before, especially with East Blue, is that a lot of these arcs are greater than the sum of their parts. So take this with a grain of salt. If you asked me again in 2 weeks, some of this stuff might be moved around. Some of it definitely wouldn't, though. I could say that. But anyway, I guess that's it. Do I save this? Mike's One Piece arc ratings. All right. Boom.